Today, for our daily cancellation, we return to the murky swamps of TikTok, ready to cancel everything in our path. And right away, a good candidate presents itself. Here's a feminist woman named Christy, who looks exactly like every other feminist woman named Christy that you've ever met, if you've had the misfortune of meeting more than one. Just as a quick introduction to Christy, this is not the video we're going to focus on today, but I just want to play one of her most recent contributions. Here she is on the issue of race. Listen.
In honor of this, white people, stitch this. How many white people?
I make it my personal business to have complex conversations about race with any and all white people that I encounter.
Complex conversations about race with all white people that you encounter. How does that work? Are you stopping people on the street? Excuse me, sir, I'd like to have a complex conversation about race with you. Maybe you go door to door like a Jehovah's Witness, except significantly more annoying. I shudder at the thought of being stuck next to her on an airplane for 3 hours. Just one more reason to choose a seat in the exit row, I guess. The exit would be for her, not for me in that case. Anyway, that gives you an idea of where she's coming from. Now let's get to the main event.
I'm here to double down on the video that made me go viral. Most men are rapists. And by that I mean most cis heteronormative men. There's a reason we say we live in a rape culture. Most rapes go unreported, some even unknown. And the way rape is portrayed and glamorized in movies and media misrepresents what most rape actually looks like. Let's just look at the updated definition of rape so that everybody's clear. The penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus or any other body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. Are you buying somebody drinks with the goal of getting them drunk enough so that they can't consent? Rapist. Coercing somebody into sex. Rapist. Guilting or manipulating someone into having sex with you? Rapist. Dating coaches and pickup artists have normalized this kind of behavior. And if you engage in any of those things, you'll be known as a rapist. Is your just the tip joke funny now?
Always with the hair. They all have the same hair. Do they go to like the hair salon and say, yeah, I'm a shrill feminist, just so go ahead and do what you do. Now you notice how she lets gay men off the hook at the start, because apparently male-on-male rape doesn't exist. This will come as welcome news to everybody who's going to prison. From there, she gives us a definition of rape that few could argue with. Rape is having sex with someone, performing any kind of sexual act with them, without their consent. Yeah, that's obviously what the term means. But then she performs the trick that has become so common in our culture, a trick that has led to lots of confusion and to very many ruined lives, by manipulating the word consent. You'll notice that she doesn't pull out the old Webster's to tell us what the word consent means. She does that with rape, but not consent. Because if she had, we'd see that consent means agreement to do something. That's it. If you agree to do it, you consented. If you were forced to do it, you didn't consent. So it's that simple. She provides the example of a man, it's always a man, as if women don't do this, a man getting a woman drunk in order to have sex with her. Now, if someone is trying to intoxicate another person with the explicit goal of taking advantage of them, and the other person has no sober intention of engaging in any kind of sexual activity, then yes, that could be a form of removing consent. But the problem is that in most cases where alcohol is involved, especially somewhere like a college campus, you have two people in a sexually charged environment, both getting drunk, and then both having sex while drunk. Who's the rapist there? Both of them? Are they raping each other? Well, the school rape tribunals always put the blame on men. In fact, I'm not aware of a single case where a woman has been charged or even accused of rape after a mutual drunk sex. The onus always falls on men. From there, she makes rape into an even more obscure concept by claiming that men, again, always men, because women never do this, men who guilt, manipulate, or coerce women into sex are rapists. Now, it's possible to imagine forms of coerced sex that would count as rape. If you tell a woman to have sex with you or you'll kill her, that's coercion, and it's obviously rape. But she says that most straight men are rapists, which means she's talking about far less dire and more generalized versions of manipulation. Essentially, what feminists mean when they say this is that trying to convince a woman to have sex, using any form of persuasion at all, is rape. Which is another way of saying that a man who tries to initiate sex, even with his own wife, potentially, is a rapist. You would have to mean that if you're trying to support the claim that most men are rapists, which is obviously ludicrous. And worse than ludicrous, as this mentality has, again, ruin the lives of many men by providing women with the framework to accuse their consensual sexual partners of rape after the fact. The word consent means what it means in reality. If you agree to do it, if you're not forced but you agreed, then you've consented. Even if you did it but you didn't want to. Even if you did it and you felt bad about it later. Even if you did it but only because you thought it was the only way to secure promotion at work. In all of those cases, in any case like them, you have agreed. You have participated of your own free will and volition. You were not raped. But even if you weren't raped, does that mean that you weren't used? Is it possible for someone to be sexually used and yet not raped? Yes. In fact, it's possible and it happens all the time. And it's bad, but it's not rape. At the end of the video, she says via text on the screen there that feeling entitled to someone's body for sexual pleasure is a rapist mentality. Now, it isn't necessarily, but it is a perverse and degraded mentality. It's also the mentality that many people in our culture, men and women, share. The moment that we ripped the sexual act out of the loving and committed confines of marriage, we turned it into a purely selfish act performed by individuals for their own gratification. Everyone involved in hookup culture is using someone's body for sexual pleasure. Everyone who looks at porn is doing that. Most of the people, men and women on dating apps, are pursuing exactly that. Are they all rapists? No. I mean, some of them are, by statistics would seem to indicate, but most of them aren't. The problem, as I've described in the past, is that in our culture today, we have no moral language to govern sex except consent. That's the only moral guide that we have left because we've thrown everything else out. The idea that sex used to be loving, sex is supposed to be loving, it's supposed to be committed. All of that we've thrown out. And we've left only consent as the one single moral rule left to govern the sexual act. And a lot of people, like the person in the video there, have, without realizing it, noticed the problem. I mean, they've looked around and they've seen that, wow, I mean, gee, so often sex in our culture today it's degraded. It seems immoral, amoral. People are just using each other as objects. I mean, to use someone else simply as basically a glorified masturbatory aid, as just this tool for you to get your thrills, that's a terrible thing. It's dehumanizing. And it is. But because they're committed to this idea that we all need to be libertines, that we can't, that the concept that sex is supposed to be loving and committed, that's patriarchal, that's religious. They're committed to that. So they've thrown that out. All they have left is consent. And so they decide that, all these cases here, these are all violations of consent. And that's how I'm going to be able to condemn them. They're not. But in many cases, they're still immoral. And that's why today, even though she like so many feminists on this issue, they're maybe closer to the point, they're closer to the truth than they realize. Still, I have to say that today she is canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.